fun one. Welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris, here as always with my co-host and A to Z Sports Tennessee writer, Zach Ragan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if you want to listen to that regularly, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify, and rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe. Because if you subscribe, you won't miss any episodes when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, 4 p.m. every Monday, live stream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Subscribe anywhere and everywhere. Or I guess, what is it on Facebook? Like the page or whatever it might be. And you can watch the live streams at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Mondays. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the little notification bell thing. And we'll hang out every Monday. And then the post-game and halftime show with me and Jonathan Crompton during football games. At Charlie_Burris, that's Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville. And A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach and I write about Tennessee. And let's get to it. The Tennessee Volunteers went to Columbia, South Carolina over the weekend. In a game where I watched a lot of actual commentary from South Carolina media leading up to kind of be like, are they saying the same stuff that we're saying? Because Zach and I kind of left that show last week and we were like, I don't think that we said enough nice stuff about South Carolina. Like they just didn't have a lot of redeeming qualities. And I went and I watched South Carolina media and they said the same exact stuff. They were like, honestly, I hope that this team doesn't lose by like 40 because that would be bad. Maybe keep it to like 20. And that was largely the take. And Tennessee went out there and laid the biggest freaking goose egg I have ever seen. That was the most unbelievable. Well, specifically the defense. The offense was decent. We're going to talk about it all. But I mean, what was it? 9 touchdowns in 10 drives. 1 stop in the entire game by Tennessee's defense. I guess in a technical sense, 3, but 2 of them were the end of the first half and the end of the game. I mean, time played better defense than Tennessee's defense. It was an embarrassment. It was a shame to the University of Tennessee. All of those players just got dragged all over the field by a team that is led by a quarterback that had 8 touchdowns in the entire season through the air. And he threw 6 in one game against this defense. As I said, we're going to talk about it all. Zach Ragan, me. What's in?
I'm still trying to process exactly what happened Saturday. It was almost like just being stunned. I mean, it took me right back to that 2016 South Carolina game, except this one was a little worse because in 2016, I think we all kind of knew, even after they had beat Florida and Georgia, that Butch wasn't going to be the guy. I mean, that confirmed it, but we kind of had our suspicions about him after blowing so many games they should have won in 2014 and 2015. So it was shocking, but it wasn't as shocking as this. You got a national championship on the line. This team's been playing great. They've had 1 loss to the best team in the country where they didn't play their best and still only lost by 14. And to go out and do that in Columbia was rough. It was rough to watch. Like you said, Spencer Rattler hasn't played well all year, and it was like he was out there playing against air because the DBs were nowhere close to South Carolina's wide receivers on most of their receptions, and tackling was poor. I mean, it was a lot, and we'll get into all of it, but it's 48 hours later, or almost 48 hours later, it's still hard to comprehend exactly what went wrong down there.
It literally didn't make sense because South Carolina hasn't, specifically on offense, hasn't played that way in one game this year. At all. Spencer Rattler has been largely bad. I mean, he hasn't been good at all for the most part. 8 touchdowns in the entire season. 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions coming into this game, and he threw 6 touchdowns? Is this real? it didn't make sense. I mean, a 22-point favorite for Tennessee coming in, and they lose by 25. I mean, what happened there? I mean, I said it to you before we got on here, Zach. What happened there for South Carolina was a miracle. Like, they came out and put on a miraculous performance. And I don't know if it was Tennessee's defense being that bad or South Carolina having a magical game plan. I'll give it to Beamer. He's a goofy mofo. Dances on TikTok videos, and he's just generally kind of weird. He's got a lot of the Butchisms. But he drew it up, and he threw it all over Tennessee. And Radler played out of his mind. Again, miraculous performance from Radler. The best game I think he's ever played in his entire career. Played against Tennessee. Of course he played it against Tennessee. It was genuinely unbelievable. Like, that's an overused word. Genuinely unbelievable. It was hard to believe. Completely. I mean, I don't know exactly how to break that down, but I don't think that you can get away from that factor of it. Like, South Carolina on that offense has been atrocious. And they came out and put up 63 points. They had scored in 5 games, they'd scored over 30 points. 5 games all season out of 10. That's half. But 3 of those were against joke competition. Vandy, which is the worst defense in the SEC. We're going to talk about them in a minute. And then the two crappy non-cons that they played. It was the 3 of those 5 were against joke competition. So they've scored 30 points against a team with a pulse twice all season. And they scored 63 on you. 63? It's hard to know where to start because at every level they were completely embarrassed. But I think the real breakdown is coaching, players, a good amount of both. What was it? What happened here? And I think I haven't gotten a straight answer yet out of all the stuff I've watched.
I know. I think it's just a culmination of a lot of different things. Certainly, it seems as though there was you got the Jeremy Banks stuff, which we're going to get into. You've got just the fact that Columbia is a weird place to play at night. South Carolina had a really good game plan with all the criticisms that Satterfield, their offensive coordinator, taken this week. It's like they came out and they were running some trick plays, just some stuff that Tennessee hadn't seen before, and they pretty much had Tennessee on their heels all night. And once Tennessee was playing catch up and pressing, it was just after it was 35-31 and they weren't able to stop South Carolina. And they made it 42-31. At that point, I pretty much knew the game was over. I thought when it was 35-31, okay, Tennessee's going to come back. They're going to figure this out. They're going to shut this offense from South Carolina that suddenly can't be stopped. They're going to shut it down in the second half. They'll make the adjustments. And once they gave up that drive, I mean, I knew it was done. I had hope, of course. I think everybody did, but I think everybody inside saw the way that game was going and was like, no, it's just not happening tonight.
You had a little bit of a door open there at what, 35, 31, right? And you kind of thought like, all right, if the defense could get a stop here, the game could flip. And the defense obviously did not. South Carolina came back with a back-breaking drive. Total embarrassment. Adam says Vandy is not the worst. They absolutely are. They're dead last in the SEC by a pretty large margin in scoring and total defense, by the way, just so you know, Adam. Even though they beat Florida and Kentucky both, that's still the case. I just looked actually. So, what was it? Because I think even somebody want to get into some of these comments while we're talking about this. Like CJ says, we couldn't get pressure and still continued to sin just 4, not 5-7. Yeah. I mean, I think Tim Banks was at a total loss in this game because South Carolina, they came to their 2 top running backs were out. Me and Cromson were talking about that, and like it almost worked to their advantage because they had to dig deep and make these adjustments where they were playing like a tight end at running back and doing all of this wildcat and running trick plays and doing all of this desperate stuff, which should throw you through a loop for like a couple of drives. You should be like, all right, whoa. We just got to orient. We got to orient, and then we'll get it together. And Tennessee had nothing for the entire game. Again, 9 touchdowns and 10 drives. it was a complete affront to anything remotely resembling good defense in football. And I don't know as far as Banks what he was doing, because it felt like to me, if somebody was giving you a conventional breakdown of that, they would be like, well, he was sending everybody back into coverage because they were getting hit over the top. But you go, they're going to hit you over the top no matter what. The DBs are slow. They were slow on the edge. They were slow in man-to-man coverage. They couldn't keep up in any way. So come after the quarterback. Obviously that's a difference of opinion. That's going to be subjective to different people looking at it different ways. But that's just how I felt. Like, they've had way more success this season doing that than they've had in this kind of like bend but don't break, back down into coverage, let them get past midfield and then get a little more serious about it kind of thing that Tim Banks has done. I mean, at a certain point, I was like, why don't they just send the house every time and make sure this kid can't get the ball off? Because you're not getting home with 4. You weren't getting home with 5 a lot of the time. That it was actually that tight end running back was doing a pretty decent job blocking. And I was just like, you gotta do something that's out of the box thinking here a little bit. Like, go balls to the wall, pin your ears back, and just see if you can get to this kid, because he's a little bit of a statue back there, and he had all day to just think about every throw he made, and it was just painful as hell to watch that absolute meltdown that happened from the very beginning. I mean, you didn't have any moment that was good in that game. Not a single. I mean, that one stop, but that was a total, aberration. That was not indicative of anything that really happened in that game. And I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but good Lord, man. All right. Well, I got so mad about the defense that I forgot to do the read for our amazing sponsor, Superbook Sports. We got to talk about them really quick. Can you beat Vegas this football season? Superbook Sports gives you the chance every week to go head-to-head with the best odds makers in Vegas. No fancy computer algorithms. No guys across the pond setting lines for American sports. Just the best team of odds makers in the business behind the counter at Superbook in Las Vegas. Plus, Superbook features some of the best odds boosts and promo bets anywhere. So download the Superbook Sports app or visit superbook.com. and start your battle against Vegas right now. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. That is Superbook Sports. They keep this show going, so help them out because they're helping out the boys here. Clearly, they, along with every other betting service on planet Earth, was extremely wrong about Tennessee in that one. And I mean, again, to the point of like, this was a miracle performance from South Carolina. And I think any honest South Carolina pundit, someone who's not just a complete biased fan, would tell you the same. This was an outlier in a way that's hard to almost wrap your brain around. It was completely insane.
I mean, we had South Carolina media people coming at us on Twitter, and it felt like, last week, really coming at us hard for no reason. And
coming at the company, not at Tennessee.
Yeah,
they were coming at A to Z Sports.
And it felt like it was just frustration because they knew that they were going to get beat. And like you mentioned earlier, they were just conceding the game. And they were like, look, we know y'all are going to beat us, but you don't have to be jerks and all this stuff. And that alone right there tells you how much confidence they had going into this game. But I think the biggest thing that Tennessee fans coming out of this game is the concern of, okay, is this 2016 all over again? Are there these major issues in the locker room that led to this loss? And I think that's where people are today. And part of that's because there's so little information out there about what went wrong off the field and then an explanation for what went wrong on the field. Ultimately, I think it's a combination of all that stuff. I think, like I said last week, going into Columbia at night, it's always a weird game. Tennessee's only won there twice since 2006. In 2014, took a miracle of their own to win that game down 14 with 2 minutes to go to end overtime. And then 2020, a COVID year, it was a day game, 19,000 fans at Williams-Brice. It wasn't the same experience. So it's always been a tough place for Tennessee to play. So I think that's one factor. I think not having Jeremy Banks there, it's kind of like when you didn't have Daniel Batuli in 2019 for the Georgia State game, or a couple of times during the Butch Jones era when Darren Kirkland was out and they didn't have that guy kind of running the defense. It's more important. You should be able to overcome that. That's no excuse to give up 63 points. it's no excuse to lose to South Carolina, even on the road. But it was a factor. I mean, Jeremy Banks is the guy that's kind of getting guys lined up. He's an energetic guy. And we spent a lot of the year praising him for playing more controlled. So to find out that some of this stuff was going on off the field where he's kind of been having some issues throughout the season, unspecified, it was a bit surprising. And it sounds like it was just a cumulative effect that all this stuff has happened and it's just added up, not major stuff, but it keeps adding up. And the coaching staff felt like they had to do something and tell him not to play. Yeah, and to build your culture, that's something you have to do sometimes, even if it's a tough decision to make, and it might cost you a game. But you got to think about what it does long term. What are you willing to let slide? Because I think that's what happened during the Butch Jones era. Is it started off pretty good, and then stuff started sliding. Kids weren't working out. They weren't going to class the way they were supposed to be. There wasn't accountability, and it just snowballs from there. And once that happens, you can't rein it back in until a new staff comes in. Like, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. And I think that's what Heupel and them were trying to prevent. I mean, that's my speculation as far as their mindset with any decision that was made. But and I get that. I think that happens at a lot of places, and a lot of times you don't even hear about it. And like we were talking about before we came on the show, anybody that's not even just played on a team, that's had a group of friends that's really close knit. Like, you have disagreements, you have things that happen. If Jeremy Banks and Hendon Hooker got into it, which Josh Heupel would not comment on today, he was directly asked if Jeremy Banks got into it with a teammate, and he just kind of dodged the question, which was probably the right thing to do. He didn't lie about it, but he also didn't put a lot of information out there either, protecting his players. But that stuff happens, right? I mean, I'm sure you've had incidents like that.
I actually love the way that Josh Heupel handled that question today. I don't know about the handling of everything internally because we don't really know exactly what happened. We're all just kind of piecing together. Whoa. Oh.
You got so excited you about knocked it all off there.
Did I come undone?
Nah, I still hear you. You're there.
Oh, so you can see me right now.
Yeah.
Where? I can't find. This is ridiculous.
Well, as you figure that out, and we're
there.
Talking
it is.
About
I got it. Well, my computer fell down off of the stand.
You talking about the way that you like the way Josh Heupel handled this?
Yes. Okay.
So recruits. Before you go into that, recruits like that too, and I know that's what people probably think about. And Nico, follows me on Twitter, and I was looking. He's liked several replies to tweets from the tweet that showed Josh Heupel's response. People have talked about glad he didn't pull a Butch Jones and say he fell on a helmet. Glad that he kept it in the locker room. And Nico's going through liking all those tweets. So if you're complaining about the way Heupel's handled it, look, your 5-star quarterback that's coming in here liked the way he handled it.
I think Heupel handled it well because, what he could have gone and done was fell on a helmet. He could have had when Shai Tuttle, whatever happened there, happened. He got a black eye, and Butch Jones, he fell on a helmet. And that's the truth. And we all knew that wasn't the truth. It's ridiculous. And Heupel just goes and he really does just say nothing. I mean, he I forget exactly what it was, but he said, he
just wasn't available. Yeah,
he wasn't available. That's what he said. Cool.
I'm good with that.
I don't need to know. But to piece it together. This is all complete hearsay. This comes from reports from reporters, reports from message boards, reports from. Honestly, I think a bunch of people.
Got a friend that knows somebody on the team,
exactly.
and a lot of just nonsense too. Yeah.
The versions range from there was a fist fight between Jeremy Banks and Hendon Hooker, and Joe Milton stepped in and separated them, all the way to there was just some yelling, and they got into it a little bit, and then they backed off, and that was the end of it. The other element in this is what you said, is where Jeremy Banks was not taking care of stuff off the field, coming late to things, not showing up, on time, and other, blowing things off that he needed to go to. And it was a cumulative effect, and maybe there was this altercation, and that was the thing that broke the camel's back, or maybe there was no altercation at all, and it was just the off the field stuff. Again, we're piecing it all together. I mean, all of that, even from us and everybody else, anyone who's talked about it is like, here's what I think happened. And believe what you want to believe there. He got suspended. and believe whether you think it was justified. I mean, I kind of said, I texted Zach, and I'll be honest, this is off the record stuff that I texted Zach, but I'm willing to talk about it here. I mean, I was basically like, that's a gutsy move by Heupel. Banks better have done something serious for you to take out essentially the emotional leader of your defense in the biggest game of your entire career. That's a gutsy move, boy, that he would do something like that, because I think you saw in that defense, he's huge in blitzes. He's a big part of that. He's probably the most aggressive guy that you have out there. Beyond that, he doesn't get the most sacks, but he's the most aggressive. He also is just a absolute leader on your defense and an energy guy, and he brings that heat, and they take him out. I'm confident in saying if he plays in that game, Tennessee probably still loses, but I think South Carolina, you could almost take at least a touchdown off the board. I think the defense that he would make, the difference that he would make, not the defense that he would make, the difference that he would make in that game. Personally, I think he would have made some play that didn't get made. I think he would have had, he maybe would have been on the sideline getting guys by the collar and being like, what the hell are you doing out there? And maybe that's the difference. And so, yeah, I mean, I kind of said, like, it better have been serious, boy. Whatever happened, because for you to have to like make an example of this kid and let him sit out because of whatever might have happened, I'm not wishing that he did something serious, but it better have been really needed, really necessary, because I think it really hurt this defense. Just my personal take on it.
I'm with you. I think they still lose that game even if Jeremy Banks plays, because the scheme, the approach, it was bad. And I've spent a lot of time this year defending Tim Banks because I've understood that he doesn't have as much to work with, but that's when you're playing Alabama. That's when you're playing Georgia. That's when you're playing even Florida to some extent with their talent. LSU, very talented team. You go play South Carolina, a team that even with the players that Tennessee lost 2 years ago, you've replaced some of that through the portal. You're close to where you need to be scholarship-wise. Tennessee's talent is better than South Carolina's, or it's at least equal at worst. So you have the guys that should be able to play with South Carolina. I mean, this is a team that scored 6 points against Florida. You got the guys to play. And Banks never really adjusted. I mean, Tim Banks, he never really adjusted. They're playing far off the corners. I mean, one play in particular, it was like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6. Kamal Hadden, who, look, I'm not going to badmouth Kamal Hadden, but the way that he played on Saturday night did not match up with the level of trash talk that he had out there on the field, because every time he got beat, every time he made a tackle, even though the play had resulted in a first down, he was immediately in the wide receiver's face, and he wasn't rattling them. If anything, they were laughing at him because they were burning him and the rest of the defense all night long. But there was one play on like 3rd and 6 where Kamal Hadden's 4 yards beyond the chains, and the receiver's just sitting there at the marker, makes the catch, easy first down. And that I think that was the drive where if they would have stopped them, maybe they had a chance to come back and take a lead. It's just calls like that where you have to stop them. You can't play that soft. I mean, you're that scared of getting beat over the top. I mean, you shouldn't be playing in this game if you're that scared, if you don't think your guys can hang with them for a few plays over the top. I mean, he never shied away from that, and it just let them have whatever they wanted underneath all night long. And then they weren't making good tackles. They're getting yards after the catch. South Carolina tackled so much better. They blocked better on the perimeter. A lot of those plays happened because their wide receivers were out on the perimeter aggressively blocking. And they might have got away with a few holds. I don't know. But they were out there doing all they could to keep, to give their guys some room to make a play, and it worked. So I think the blame for most of this loss has to fall on Tim Banks. It feels pretty obvious, but I don't see anywhere else you go. The offense pretty much did their job. They could have played better. Hendon Hooker could have played better. He could have completed a few more passes. He was not as crisp as he has been. He really hasn't been since that Georgia game. But it really falls on Tim Banks. And, I mean, where you go from there in the offseason, if a change is made, I don't know. I mean, that's something we might be talking about here in a couple of weeks.
I think when you talk about the offense compared to the defense there, that's about how I probably expected the offense to play in that game. That's a tough environment.
Yeah.
South Carolina was loud.
And they handled it better than the Georgia game. You didn't see
Yeah.
a ton of false starts. I mean, you saw some self-inflicted penalties, but that was holding was most of them,
Yeah.
offensive holding.
They played about how I probably would have expected. I would have expected 40 to 50 points, and they scored 38. I mean, it wasn't way off. And I think if you played better defense, they would have had probably 3 or 4 more opportunities to score in that game, and probably would have capitalized on a couple of them. So 40 to 50 points. I think that offense, that's not where I go in this one at all. 38 points, and one of those touchdowns was from a backup even. Like, come on. And so, it all falls on Banks. You do have to talk about, is this I don't want to say the end for Tim Banks. He's going to coach in the Vandy game, and that's, he's not getting fired this week.
No.
But we did want to bring this up just because it's a little bit of self-promotion that we can do. But also, I think it's a great point from somebody that we talked to on this podcast. So we had Josh Pate on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was awesome. And you asked him, Zach, you said, does Heupel have the setup here to turn this into a Georgia-style situation with Kirby? Where he's putting the building blocks in place for this to be a powerhouse going forward. You asked him that. And I want to play his response here and then talk about what might happen in the offseason in light of this horrendous performance from Tim Banks. This is like 2 minutes, but we'll just play it here and then we'll talk about what Josh Pate said.
You fans are hoping.
Yes, I do. And it's because the buy-in has started to happen. A lot of these guys, Saban, for example, did not have to sell people that he could win when he got to Alabama. Everyone knew he could win. Kirby, even though he was coming there as a first-time head coach, he kind of got benefit of the doubt from being under Saban that I know the blueprint. And that's why he came into Georgia and got so many yeses really, really quickly when it came to what they needed. I mean, I'm down there last week. I'm standing in their indoor facility and they say, we only just got this thing a few years ago. Previously, there had been so much pushback because that place didn't really want to do what it took to win. They wanted to win on Saturday. Everybody wants to win on Saturday. But the Sunday through Friday, they drug their feet on some stuff that Nick Saban would laugh at. Well, Kirby got it done over there because people didn't doubt his pedigree and therefore his vision. Josh Heupel, I think, had to sell a few more people when he got to Tennessee because he came in there from Central Florida, and it's not like they were going 12-0 every year down there. I mean, they were operating at a level that was pretty good, but he wasn't coming in and without the ability to be questioned, in other words. Well, now I think he's gotten that vision across, and it can tell everyone and can put proof of product in their face and say, look, if we do it my way, here's what happens. That is what you need administratively. Then he has to start assessing his staff, because here's the fact, and I'm not talking about any one guy in particular, but here's the fact. Josh Heupel will be able to get yeses from some coaching candidates this cycle that he would not have got yeses from last cycle, because some guys out there were probably on the fence that now will be in the yes column. I don't know how many moves he wants to make or if he wants to make any moves, but that's in play now.
So that last point is the one that we really wanted to hit on here. So Pate is basically like, you've done enough this season to where you can go out and stack a more elite staff. And Banks isn't getting it done. And like Eric makes this point here is like, so I don't think you blame Tim Banks. He can't go out there and play for them. That set of players is not good, but there are things that you can do to help. As I said, they're beating you over the top no matter what. Well, you could have blitzed more. You could have gone. You're not going to stop Radler from throwing to these guys because they're going to be open. So why not come after Radler so he can't get the best pass off? Like there's things that you can do schematically that can mitigate some of that. And so now, if Heupel does want to make this move, I love Pate's point there. I think he could make a more elite hire and maybe aim pretty high. And does he go and try to do that? Was this that bad? I think is kind of the question.
I mean, this could be like Clemson in 2011, I believe, when they lost to West Virginia 70-33 in the bowl game, and they fired Kevin Steele. and then you hire Brent Venables, who was there for a decade after that, and was a big reason why Clemson turned the corner. I mean, I made this comparison on Twitter. This loss to South Carolina kind of reminds me to an early Dabo Swinney Clemson loss, though it was a little worse than some of Dabo's. But either way, kind of reminds me of some of those early Clemsoning games when we used to have that term. They hired a new defensive coordinator in Brent Venables, and that's kind of what helped to get them over the top. Still took a couple of years to get there, but that's what had to happen. And that might be a similar situation. And what Josh Pate's saying, it is true that Heupel heard some no's. Matt House, the defensive coordinator in it's at LSU now, he told Tennessee no. I mean, he was close. They were working on a deal. He was the linebackers coach at with Kansas City Chiefs at that time. He had previously been at Kentucky. Just couldn't quite sell him on being a defensive coordinator for Josh Heupel on that up-tempo offense. He didn't know what it was going to look like in the SEC. So they couldn't get the deal done. They ended up going to Tim Banks. So even he took some convincing to come to Tennessee. So he did go through some no's that first cycle. So if he goes back out there, I think you've got 2 years of film. Defensive coordinator knows what they're getting into. They might be much more willing to take that job. The one problem I have with hiring a defensive coordinator is who. I mean, it's way too premature to even think about names, but just these big name defensive coordinator hires a lot of times don't work out. A lot of times the best defensive coordinators end up being the guys that come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're just a great SEC defensive coordinator. So it's really going to be on Heupel, not so much to, if he does make a change, to hire a big name, because we've seen that before with Bob Shoop and in 2016. It's going to be more in hiring the right guy, the guy that can gel with the staff, and who knows any other moves that might get made. That, again, it's a little early to talk about that as far as specific people or names, but that's what you'd have to keep in mind. So you just got to trust that Heupel will be able to hire the guy he really does want this time around. Is I'm not sure Tim Banks was. Well, I know there were other people Heupel wanted to hire aside from Banks that he wasn't able to, or that the administration didn't necessarily want him to go with. So maybe this time he's going to have more freedom.
Yeah, I believe the story on Banks. It's been an admirable effort. I mean, I'll say for sure, Banks is working with a thin set of players. It's been an admirable effort. You beat Alabama, you beat Florida, you beat LSU. You know, he did some stuff here, and I'm not going to take that away from him. That was one of the worst defensive efforts I've ever seen in a college football game, period, much less just at Tennessee. So you got to take the good with the bad. And I believe he had never solely called plays coming in.
Correct.
And, you know, just getting a guy that's like a stalwart dude that's called plays maybe at multiple places, or at least for a long time somewhere, and is also kind of on the bleeding edge of college football. I think that's something you got to look for, that's going to gel with Heupel, because Heupel is just really pushing the envelope in every way that he possibly can. I think that's got to be part of it also. And obviously, if he wants to get rid of Tim Banks at all, I don't know.
Yeah, he might not. He might think that's just a bad game, and he might think part of it was on the player's approach. I do see that to some extent. I mean, ultimately they're the ones that have to go out there and execute. My problem is like we talked about, the calls just weren't good for what South Carolina was doing. They weren't putting the players in a good position to make plays and to stop South Carolina. So yeah, the players have to execute, and they could have played better. I'm sure all of them would say that, but I don't think they were put in a good position to have success either.
To me, Jeffy in the comments right here, this one is non-negotiable. Willie Martinez got to go, in my personal opinion. I know everybody knows me as the fire people guy. Here's my fire people: Willie Martinez. He got it.
Yeah, and it's like, I like Willie Martinez. I think he's a good guy. I think players like him. I think recruits like him. But yeah, the secondary play just hasn't got better. In fact, it seems like it's got worse as the years went along. You know, him and Heupel had some connections, and plus his previous time at Tennessee is the reason that he ended up in Knoxville on this staff. But it does seem like, you're going to have to go find something else, because the DBs just aren't playing. I mean, it's been the weakest part of the team all season long. They've dealt with injuries. I mean, Warren Burrell's been out, hadn't banged up early, hurt your depth. So they have had some adversity they've had to deal with. But even then, against South Carolina, like if that game happens And that game kind of did happen against Alabama. Luckily, it just wasn't as bad. But if that game happens against an Alabama, against a Georgia, against a high-powered offense, if you go play Ohio State, if they would have made the playoff or something and that happens, it's not as shocking as when it happens to the team that literally scored 6 points the week before.
Exactly. I mean, the effort from the DBs, yeah, they're slow, and I don't think most of those guys are SEC caliber guys.
Yeah, you lost a lot of speed when you lost Alontae Taylor, you lost
Yes.
Theo Jackson. I mean, you lost that hurt this defense a lot.
Like, and they may be guys that'll be, some of them are just young and maybe SEC talent in the future, and they're just green still. But some of them it's just not ever going to be there. But you look and like the tackling is bad. The technique is bad. They look lost out there. That's coaching.
Yeah.
And
South Carolina tackled so much better than them on Saturday night. Like those slants, there were so many times it looked like it should be a first down, and they just made the tackle. They got down the fundamentals and made the tackle the way they're supposed to, and they kept a 7-yard gain from turning into a 15-yard gain, and they did that all night long. Georgia did it too. I expected it. I was kind of surprised at how well South Carolina tackled, and it really showed the difference in Tennessee's defensive backs and their tackling and South Carolina's tackling. And you're right, that is coaching.
Stark. It was stark. So, I mean, we can continue breaking down the defense. I do obviously want to get to talking about Hendon Hooker here, the most tragic part of this entire game, without a doubt. But as far as the defense goes, because it was really the focal point there, again, I mean, it's the reason that you lost by far and away, without a doubt, in this game. But was there anything else you wanted to hit on before we move on?
Yeah, I would say the big talk on Twitter yesterday, today, social media in general, has been the culture. Is there a culture problem? Are there these big locker room problems? Because you see a loss that shocking. You see all the Jeremy Banks stuff, which, again, so much of that is rumor and people that weren't in the room trying to figure out what happened. I don't think we can really answer that question just yet. And I don't think it's fair to really even try, because we don't have a pattern here that we can look at. We don't have there haven't been issues that we know of up until this point. So I think we got to wait and see what happens in this Vanderbilt game, see how they come out. Is Jeremy Banks back? He says he's going to be, based on his Instagram comments. Heupel seems like he's going to be available this next week. Are they anticipating? You know how he is with not really committing half the time. Let's see how this game goes. Let's see how they play. Let's watch their mannerisms. Let's watch their body language. Let's see how they rally around each other. If we see the same issues we saw against South Carolina, then I think we can start talking about culture problems. But I don't think it's fair to do that until we see this Vanderbilt game and see what happens and how they finish the season.
Exactly. With Butch, it was a pervasive thing that popped up again and again.
We knew it.
And again. This would be the first time it's happened with Heupel. And I think to a certain extent, you got 100 kids in there, more. And these things happen. And they happen to everybody. And so, it happens on the Nick Saban team.
The fact that a locker room dispute happened between Hendon Hooker and Jeremy Banks, if that's what happened, that doesn't bother me at all, because I guarantee you there's a lot of those that have happened that nobody's ever heard about, and that players probably didn't even think twice about, because they've grown up playing sports, and it's something that they've seen since a young age. I mean, I've seen my kids' youth baseball team have little interactions between them. I've seen adults in those same situations that are friends get into disputes. So it does happen. You got 100 people in a locker room. I don't care how good of a coach you are, how good your culture is. Human beings are human beings. You get a group of 100 guys together and they're spending a lot of time together. There's going to be some disagreements. It's going to happen. I think
naturally.
I think my gut is that it's been blown out of proportion, and I think people like drama and they like to think about stuff like this, and it's easy to point to a cultural issue being the reason for the loss. But I really think it's as simple as just a bad game plan, bad energy. I mean, that to me is the not so subtle secret about what happened.
South Carolina came in with a great game plan. Tim Banks came in without a game plan, I guess, or something, and didn't adjust and didn't do anything, and they blew you out of the water. And that is what it is. I would have to see much more evidence of cultural problems than Jeremy Banks and Hendon Hooker yelled at each other. I gotta see way
And
more
look,
than that.
and we're not burying our heads
yell
in
at
the
people.
sand. We're not burying our heads in the sand at all on this. If it gets to that point, we'll talk about it. We went all in on it during Jeremy Pruitt, and after the Kentucky loss and the things that happened at the end of his time, we won't shy away from it. I just don't think it's fair to go there quite yet.
No. Yeah. So I mean, I'll happily talk about it. I destroyed Butch over that. I mean, I excoriated him. I love that word. But really, I hit on that constantly when I was doing full-time media at the time. So believe me, I'm not afraid to go there. But then when you turn to the offense, again, the offense with more chances, you would have put up 40 to 50 points, and you probably would have won the game with a decent defense here. And you should have. The defense plays with a half decent effort, and you win this game. And so the offense was fine until Hendon Hooker. This is just painful. Goes down, non-contact injury. It's a torn ACL, confirmed yesterday by UT. Sickening. South Carolina's field was in atrocious shape. They should be ashamed of that. It was.
I kept waiting on the waves from the ocean to wash over midfield because it's like they're playing on the beach. There was so much sand.
On the play where he ripped his ACL, his back foot drags across the turf and it's just all of this sand that flies up. And you just go, what is this amateur hour field care here? This is the SEC. Like, put a little care into this, boys. Hello, somebody. It was terrible. I mean, that South Carolina had players get hurt. Brandon, and then you had other Tennessee players, Brandon Turnage, Danico Slaughter go down. I mean, it was terrible the whole night. I even heard, I was listening to Basilio's post game. He had a guy who said he does turf management as a job call in. And he was like, you could tell that the top layer of turf was not well rooted at all. And that it looked like they had like planted it yesterday or seeded it yesterday, I guess. And I mean, it was just horrendous. And so he tears his ACL. It's not the reason that Tennessee lost. Again, I'm sure South Carolina fans going to be, oh, does Tennessee lost because the field? No, Tennessee didn't lose because of the field. Tennessee lost because the defense played the worst game of football I've ever witnessed. But the field did tear Hendon Hooker's ACL. And I mean, it's horrendous. And like Alan makes a point here. Georgia used to say that about our field.
I thought it looked rough. Yeah.
I thought that about it. When was it Gurley or whoever ripped his ACL at not Gurley,
Nick Chubb did.
Nick Chubb.
At Neyland,
Nick Chubb ripped his ACL at Tennessee. I'm happy to say that because Tennessee's field was bad back then. It was bad. South Carolina's field was bad then too. Or for this game this week. It was just really, really bad. And I mean it's a safety hazard. Period. And so the Tennessee career, for one of the best players that's ever suited up for this great program, is over because of their awful field management. And it's a total shame, and it's gutting, and it's just horrendous. And I could not feel worse for the kid. Made me almost well up in tears. I was just, it was so much worse than the actual loss even.
Mm-hmm.
Like because you just feel on an extremely human level. It's like sports is a game, but on an extremely human level, you just go, this kid didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to have the best season a QB has had at this school in forever and have his ACL ripped apart by this garbage field. And was just absolutely sick about it, man.
It was a very strange feeling on Saturday night when that happened, because by that point the game had pretty much been decided. There was really no hope for a comeback, and he goes down non-contact. I think we all knew pretty much what it was going to be. I mean, you hope for the best, but with everything going on, the situation didn't really hit me until the next day when Tennessee made the announcement that this is it. This is like, we will never see Hendon Hooker take another snap in a Tennessee uniform. And it's not how you wanted to send him out at all. You wanted it to be in a playoff game, right? I mean, you wanted to see him in a semifinal game, and a championship game, and just a magical ending. Even in that moment, though, knowing that was slipping away and it probably wasn't going to happen, you still wanted to see him go beat Vanderbilt, get Tennessee somehow to the Sugar Bowl if they get some help from LSU losing and maybe Alabama. you wanted to see him go out that way. Like that would have been the next best thing, an 11-win season, beating Alabama, Florida, LSU in one season. I mean, that's still it's a hell of a season, and anybody would have signed up for it. And to know that he's not going to be able to do that, it is gutting just because of what he stood for, the way he carried himself. I think his impact on the quarterback room is going to last a long time because you got guys like Joe Milton and Taven Jackson that have been in there soaking that up. And even Joey Hosley, the quarterback's coach, is going to learn from the way Hendon Hooker handled himself. And that's going to be the standard moving forward at Tennessee. And it's going to be because Hendon Hooker laid this foundation for every quarterback that's going to come after him in the coming years. So you can't say enough about what he's meant to Tennessee and the way he's done it, the way he's carried himself and handled himself. I mean, he's really been a miracle for Tennessee, and the way his story, the way he ended up there, transferring from Virginia Tech, committing to Jeremy Pruitt, staying through a coaching change with a coach that he knew nothing about really. It says a lot about his character and who he is as a person. So really going to miss him, really unfortunate, and just hate it for him and his future too, because now it's so late in the season that's going to impact his draft status, and he's not going to be able to work out and go through pro days and the combine. I mean, it's going to have a big effect on him.
He will be. I guess it depends on the speed. I actually was listening. Here's a little promo. Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports earlier today, he did a segment with an orthopedic surgeon from the Bone and Joint Institute in Nashville. And they talked about Hendon's injury and going forward, what it kind of means for him and his NFL prospects. And they said that he'll basically be right on the line when draft prep is coming up. So it'll be like March-ish when all of that is going down. And pro day is out of the question and some of those things like that. But he should be able to theoretically work out some, like he'll be back to participating in some degree, because that'll be 5 months, and you can be back in some degree by that point, but it's still, the timing is just couldn't be worse. I mean, unless it was just the bowl game where he did it or something like that, but it just was every part of it, and it ended with a fumble. Like it was just a kick in the head and then a kick in the nuts, just like right one after the other. And he fumbled the ball because he felt his knee rip. Like you could tell it happened all at the same time. He felt his knee go. He let go of the ball to grab his knee. Like it was the worst. It was a literal waking nightmare. Everything about it. It was sickening, horrifying. Everything that is the worst part of this amazing sport. Like,
do you think, and I only asked, I really hadn't even considered this because I figured once the ACL happened, obviously he's not going to win the Heisman, but does he still get invited to New York and on the stage? Because Josh Heupel was asked that today, and I was kind of surprised at the question, but then after I heard Heupel's answer, I was like, well, maybe it's a pretty good question, because Heupel seems to think that he's deserving. Of course, he's going to say that about his quarterback, but Heupel's been on that stage. He knows kind of the qualifications and what it takes to get there. Because I think that's still really important to get Hooker there, to get that notoriety. I think he deserves to have that, even though he's not going to win at this point. He deserves to have that experience. Do you think that he gets invited? It's only one regular season game that he's missing. Heisman Trophy ceremony is, I don't know if it's voted on before the conference championships or not. I know it's the weekend after the conference championships. So he's really only missing, I think, one game.
I think it's after.
Of his resume as far as that goes. So does he still get on the stage?
I would hope so. I mean, I don't love, if you want to call it a charity case, but I think he earned it. I genuinely, I think he did. Because I think, he wasn't going to do anything in these two games that was going to win him the Heisman necessarily, more likely than not. They just aren't spectacular games. You're playing bad opponents. And so I wish they would. I really wish they would, because he just deserves something. Don't let him go out like that. It was just so gross on an opponent's field. And man, like I can't say enough about that whole situation, because it just made me ill. But that being said, turn, and this is Joe Milton's team now. And it's that's a whole interesting element here going forward, because I don't want to say that you take these last two games, this in the bowl game, differently, but I think it paints everything in a different light than it would have looked if Hooker doesn't take that injury. You would have still taken you said it. The game was over when Hooker went down. It was already over. But with Milton leading you in the last two games, does this, like, if Tennessee takes care of business next week, makes it to the Orange Bowl against Clemson or something, and Tennessee loses that game, do we look on it and we go like, well, you didn't get to 11 wins, but Hooker wasn't playing, and I hate that element of this. I hate that so much because you almost like, if a Clemson fan brags about that, well, you go like, well, it wasn't like really the team. Like, our starting quarterback wasn't playing, and I hate that. It just everything about this sucks so much, man.
I don't think you can look at the Vanderbilt game that way, because whether it's Joe Milton or Hendon Hooker, that's a game that you should win. You got more talent.
True, that's true.
Even without Hooker. So as far as the bowl game, I was thinking about this earlier. You want to go to the Sugar Bowl, but that means you're probably going to play a pretty tough game, right? Is it more important to play in the Sugar Bowl with Joe Milton starting, a game that maybe the other team's favored because Hooker's not playing? Or do you want that 11th win more, where you'd be willing to play in the Outback Bowl? Because what do you remember more a year or two from now? I think about Ole Miss. Is Ole Miss celebrating that they went to the Sugar Bowl and then they lost because Matt Corral got hurt? I mean, if Matt Corral doesn't get hurt, maybe they win that game and they win 11 games. Instead, they go 10-3, and Lane Kiffin's, he's won 10 games. That 11 wins sounds a lot better. Do you care what bowl game it comes in if it's the 11th win, or is playing in the Sugar Bowl more important?
I mean, to me, at this point, I know a lot of Tennessee fans aren't going to love this. I don't care what consolation prize Tennessee gets. It's a consolation prize.
Yeah.
You were looking for the playoff and you didn't make it. And so to me, the season is not a failure by any means. And I don't want that to be misconstrued that way. The season's been unbelievable and will forever be. I mean, this is the foundation. Hendon Hooker will forever be remembered as the guy that, especially if this turns into a semi-powerhouse going forward where you're winning 10-plus games a year every year, Hendon Hooker will always be remembered as the dude that set the foundation, and that's incredible. But as far as this bowl game goes, I mean, I don't want it to be the Music City Bowl for sure, and I don't think it will be. But, if it turns in, everybody's been like, oh, the Citrus Bowl. The Citrus Bowl's cool. I don't know. I'm not like, yeah, we can go back to the dumb Spurrier jokes. You can't spell citrus without UT or whatever, but like, this isn't the 1990s. I don't care about that anymore. If Tennessee goes and they have to play, I don't know, who would it even be at this point? UCLA, and they beat UCLA, that's a win on the schedule. I don't really care. It just doesn't matter to me, because what I wanted was the playoff. I mean, the Sugar Bowl would be a nice payoff. I think it's going to end up being Alabama. Unless they somehow sneak into the playoff, which is kind of possible. I guess we could talk about that, but it's a lot of exposition and things that need to happen. But it's all a consolation prize, frankly. The Sugar Bowl is a consolation prize. I wanted that playoff, man. I wanted it bad. I wanted it so bad, and it's done now.
Yeah, I feel that way too. And it's not like you said, it's not to call the season a failure, but I think once Tennessee went to number 1 in the playoff rankings, the goals for the season changed. I mean, then you're right there.
Exactly.
You have just as good. You're right there where Ohio State, where Michigan, where all these. You're where Clemson wants to be. I mean, you are where Clemson's goal is to win a national championship. Alabama's goal is to win a national championship, and you're in that position. So I think that changed the goals a little bit. So, yeah, it does feel like a letdown if you go play in the Sugar Bowl after thinking that you're going to make the playoff. All you got to do is win these last two games and hope that TCU or USC loses. Or even if they don't lose, maybe you get in. And I think part of that right there, too, is my theory on why this team has looked the way it has since Georgia. Ever since they got to number 1 in the rankings, I don't think that it went to their head. But I think before they got to number 1 in the rankings, after they beat Kentucky, I feel like that team had a mindset. They were playing so loose that they were playing with house money, and there wasn't these there wasn't a lot of expectations on them. There wasn't a lot of pressure. And once they went to number one, and then you're playing this huge game against Georgia, they haven't looked the same since that. Even against Missouri. I mean, that's a one-score game in the second half. Missouri kind of, the wheels fell off for them. Tennessee started executing better. But for one half, if that game's at Missouri, I don't know. I don't want to know what happens in that game if it's a road game at Missouri. It could have been the South Carolina game. They seem like they've been out of sorts since then. So this team, they weren't ready to handle this type of success and to be hit with those types of expectations. And that's part of the growing process of this program. It's something you got to go through. It's something that I think Kirby went through it a little bit early on, just a little. I think even Nick Saban went through it at times. I mean, the guy early on, he's won a national championship and he still goes and loses to South Carolina when he's ranked number one. I mean, we've seen this happen with Ohio State did it under Ryan Day. They got blown out by Iowa when they were ranked in the top 5, and I believe Iowa was unranked. Like, this stuff
that happens. Purdue
happens.
Too.
Yeah, you've got to learn from it, and you've got to go through it. Every single coach that coaches college football has been through this before at some point, from Nick Saban to Josh Heupel and everybody in between. So I don't think it's an indictment of Heupel or the team by any means, but I do think it's something they had to go through. Heupel hadn't been in that position as a coach before. I mean, he'd been there as a player, but he hadn't been there as a coach of a team. Nobody on the staff really had either. So I don't think it's this terrible sign that some people think it is, that something is amiss with this program. I think it's just college football.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just know what you don't know. And Heupel, while he had an undefeated regular season at UCF and then went and played in the bowl game and almost beat, I forget who it was, but he had a 1-loss season.
Oh, yeah, LSU.
That's right. It was LSU.
Joe Burrow. It was
yeah. But he's done that much, but it's still a pretty giant learning curve to come in and not just be in SEC football. I think he's got a decent handle on that, but to come in and be in SEC football and be the number one team in America, like, that's a crazy thing that very few coaches ever experience, period, much less a guy who's in his second year at a total rebuild. And so it's a totally new thing that he's learning also. I think he's extremely capable of getting there. And I think he will. That my personal expectation is that he will. I have not seen the red flags or anything nearly at all that I ever saw with a Butch or a Pruitt or a Dooley or anything like that. And so I do think, to go forward to this Vandy game, which we do have to talk about eventually, I don't know if I want to get fully into it quite yet, but this week is huge. And I'm sure people will realize it more as the week goes along, because I think we're also sort of in shock from the South Carolina game. This is going to say a lot about Josh Heupel, because here's the two things that could happen this week. One is a 10-win season that's the best season since 2004 at Tennessee, and a celebration, potentially an Orange Bowl bid, whatever, and losing to Vanderbilt and questioning everything about this program. That's the juxtaposition of what could happen this week. Now, I think I say questioning everything about this program. That would only really be the case if they got blown out by Vandy, where you kind of go like, oh, did Heupel lose the team? Did what? Because I need to get blown out by Vandy in this one. They gotta quit. That would be a next level bad outcome here. But I think it's a bit of a razor's edge this week, and it's unfortunate because Heupel blew the expectations through the roof, and then now you're on the precipice of the best season since 2004, and you gotta follow through, because the expectation is going through Vandy. And I'm not going to give you a pass if you don't beat Vandy. That's not if the final game to get the 10 wins was the LSU game or something, and they ended up losing, I'd be like, okay, that was LSU in Death Valley. Fine. But this is Vandy. And if he didn't beat Vandy, has there ever been a Tennessee coach that lost to Vandy, at least in this modern era, that made it out alive? No. There hasn't been. So, that's the situation that's coming up this week. And like we can say like, oh, well, Hendon's not playing or anything, but don't act like you're not going to remember that he lost to Vandy. You'll remember that if that happens. We'll look back and we'll be like, that was great, but he lost to Vandy. That's going to be the talking point on the season. Oh, that was a fun season, but he lost to Vandy. Don't think that won't be the talking point after this. If you can be as kind as you want to, but that is what they're facing this week.
Yeah, you absolutely can't lose to Vanderbilt no matter who's starting at quarterback. But it's going to be a tough game because Vanderbilt's playing for bowl eligibility. They've been playing better lately. So it's far from the gimme game that we thought it was. And I really don't know what to expect at this point from Tennessee after watching them lose to South Carolina that way, kind of struggle early on against Missouri. I think this is going to be a very telling week, and we're going to learn a lot about Josh Heupel this week as a coach and how he rebounds from a tough situation, because this is the first time that he's really faced adversity. I mean, he had kind of the grace period in 2021, and he really kind of exceeded some expectations, went 7-6, which I thought is what you want to do, but a lot of people didn't think he would. So he did kind of what we expected him to do that season. And then Georgia, you kind of get a pass on that a little bit because it's Georgia. You don't get a pass on losing to South Carolina in that way, especially getting blown out. So this is the first time that he's really got to show, like, hey, we can come back from this adversity. And Elts mentioned that I misspoke on Ryan Day. It was not Ryan Day that lost to Iowa. It was Urban Meyer, which I completely forgot that was still Urban Meyer.
Big Ten Jeff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Not speaking bad about Ryan Day. I have nothing against Ryan Day. I know a lot of people say that he took over, a great situation, and he did, but we've seen guys take over great situations and not do well with it at all and drive it straight into the ground. So
he's done a good job.
I think he's lost 4 games total there. So I'm not bad mouthing Ron Day at all. I think he's a great coach and has done a really good job there.
Yeah, he started with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he's kept it there. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, look at Brent Venables at Oklahoma took over a great situation. It has not went well at all for him. So I'm not throwing any shade at Ryan Day.
But there just are facts here that are tough to swallow, even beyond how terrible that game was. Like, that is the situation you're facing this week, and we have to be really real about that. I don't think that you can overlook what it would do sort of visually for Josh Heupel if you lose to Vanderbilt. I mean, that's the cornerstone no for a Tennessee coach. And you would beat Alabama and lose to Vanderbilt. What a season that would be if that actually happens. But, well, I mean, before we get to it, we can just go ahead and get to it. Although I think there are a couple of things I want to mention before that. But anything else with the actual game itself, Zach, that we may have overlooked that you want to mention?
I didn't think we'd really be breaking down how Tennessee needs to beat Vanderbilt because it was just assumed that they would beat them. But I don't think we can't assume that anymore with this being a road game and Vanderbilt playing well. I assume there will be a lot of Tennessee fans there. Saw somebody mention it earlier. Please don't checker Neyland at this point. You cannot checker Neyland after you lose. I mean, not Neyland,
checker
Vanderbilt Stadium. You cannot checker Vanderbilt Stadium after losing to South Carolina. You just can't do it. Wear as much orange as you like. Orange out. Make the crowd look as orange as possible. Be loud. Try to make it feel like a home game. But I think it's kind of like the cleats in the ground thing. It died once they lost to South Carolina. It's over. You can't go back to it. You kind of ruined the shtick there, but I think they just got to get out to a fast start. They have to come out. They have to score fast. They have to score early. I wouldn't even give Vanderbilt the ball if you win the toss. I would take the ball and try to go score and get the crowd out of it, whoever's there. Because I do think Vanderbilt will have some fans show up. It's not going to be a tough environment because there's just not enough people that stadium holds. But I think there's a little bit of excitement now with Vanderbilt football because, I mean, they can go knock off Tennessee and become bowl eligible, which nobody expected. So I do think they're going to be ready for this game, Vanderbilt. But I think Tennessee's players, they know. I think Omari Thomas said it today. They know that Vanderbilt's chasing a bowl game and they're going to get their best shot. And I don't think that they realize that about South Carolina. I think they listened to some of the noise coming from South Carolina, basically waving the white flag. I think that creeped into their psyche just a little bit.
Yeah. I think Vandy's going to play with pride in this one, and you got to watch out. But we'll get to that in just 1 second. First, just want to mention some recruiting tidbits. One piece of good news: Khalifa Keith, the decommit from Kentucky, is now committed to Tennessee. Did that yesterday, and that's all. I mean, it's just nice, just stealing from Kentucky like that. Can't help but enjoy it. He's not a super highly rated prospect, but I think he is a nice addition to that running back room, and that's fun. Beyond that, David Hobbs got the 5-star defensive lineman got another crystal ball for Tennessee after the game even. His announcement is coming up on Friday. And this is what I wanted to talk about for recruiting here. A lot of people after that, I had folks in my mentions that were like, oh, this is so bad for recruiting. I can't believe they would do this. Everything's going to fall apart. Don't put too much weight on one game. I think, and it goes both ways. I mean, we talked about after the Florida game and the Alabama game and those environments, like those are incredible for recruiting, but one game singularly can impress a recruit, but it's a body of work that gets them here. And honestly, I almost think there's really nothing that can happen for the rest of this season that is going to throw away the class that Tennessee already has for 2023. It may make things maybe slightly rockier for 2024, but even still, 9 wins already. And 9 wins for a program that's coming off just being a complete dumpster fire. And I think you still go. It kind of gives you this talking point almost. Not that in any way this loss to South Carolina was a good thing, but especially to defensive players, you can almost go, hey, look, we won 9 games this year, or 10 games if they could be Vandy. Look at that. Now, come with me and watch the South Carolina game. Now, you see that cornerback right there? He's terrible. You're not terrible. So how about you come to Tennessee and I'm going to give you that guy's job and you can take over. You kind of have that selling point. I think it also gives you a big selling point with, and Mr. Jones says it here in the comments. He says transfer portal will be huge also. It gives you a real talking point for the transfer portal to go like, please, dear God, we need you.
And I think based on what people have said and what's out there, it sounds like Tennessee's going to go pretty heavy in the portal. And I think that's probably because of the secondary and the defensive side of the ball. They got the dudes on offense. I mean, you got guys that have stepped up when other guys have went down. I mean, Ramel Keaton played extremely well, and Tillman's absence had to come in the second half when Brew McCoy went down. Played pretty well, made a couple of catches. You got those dudes, but you need guys on the defensive side. You need more pass rushers. You need more. I mean, you need everything, really. The secondary is the weakest point, but you need upgrades all across that unit. So I think they'll be very heavy in the portal, and obviously NIL is going to be a big part of that. It has to be a big part of that at this point. That's just the way the game is played. And, now that Josh Heupel's officially endorsed Spire as the collective for Tennessee, they can kind of utilize that a little better partnership there between the collective and the school. So hopefully they are able to find some guys in the portal that can help this defense, because otherwise next year is going to be just as bad defensively.
Come on down. Anybody and everybody. We need you. I mean, good Lord. Yeah, so hopefully they do both of those things. But I would say if you're freaking out over that game recruiting wise, don't put too much stock in it. It's one game, and it also is a game that now kind of gives you a selling point to go like, look how bad this defense is. Why don't you come play defense for us? And you still have 9 wins to show them. A win over Alabama, a win over Florida, a win over LSU. You have all of that still stacked up, tons of goodwill. And I don't think that one freak game is going to scare anybody off.
Real quick, talking about the portal, this is an interesting point, Ben Hall says, and I hope Kirby Smart hates that we're looking to the portal since every 5-star on the planet is currently on his roster. Yeah, teams can't really hoard talent the way they used to anymore.
No.
Don't play those guys. If you're a junior, and it doesn't matter if you're a 4-star, 5-star, whatever it is, you're a talented player, you're going to look for a place you can get on the field.
Yeah.
And if you're there and you see the path is kind of muddied and it's running out of time and you think you have NFL potential, you're going to go somewhere where you can play. So in general, the portal levels the playing field for so many different reasons. One, because you're able to rebuild a roster so much faster, and that's helped Josh Heupel and a lot of other programs. But you get some of that talent away from Georgia too. You get a guy from Georgia, you're hurting them and helping yourself. I mean, I do think that's part of why we're starting to see more parity in college football. Outside of Georgia, I feel like there's been a lot of parity in college football this season, and I think it's going to continue to see that more and more.
Absolutely. Hopefully. We just need the guys. Come on down and play for Tennessee, please. Please. Now we can get to this Vandy game. Yeah, this isn't as straightforward as we thought it would be a week ago, as crazy as it is. Joe Milton's your quarterback. Brew McCoy got banged up in that game against South Carolina. I think he'll be fine.
I don't think he came back at all in the second half, though.
He didn't, and I wondered if it was precautionary or not. But it wasn't a knee or anything. It wasn't, I think it was like a rib or something.
Yeah.
Nobody asked about it at the press conference today. Not that Heupel would have given a straight answer anyway, but
we'll see where he's at later in the week.
Yeah,
that's what his answer would have been.
That's what he said about everybody. Danico Slaughter, hurt. Brandon Turnage, hurt at positions that already stink. Not great. I think you have to play every game, this Vandy game and the bowl game, basically with the assumption that whatever team you play, you have to assume that they're going to be able to pass all over you. I think you just have to, period. That has to be the assumption. And it's not that I think Vandy's quarterback is going to be some magician, but the possibility is there for any quarterback to be a magician against Tennessee, because look at the body of work here. So there's that. I think with Milton, Tennessee should be fine points production wise. It would just be so hard for me to believe that a guy with, at this point, that much experience and that, who's so familiar with how everything works, who's also a team leader. He's a backup team leader and really has kind of taken that role and is one of the best friends to Hendon Hooker and has, they've learned together and come up that way. I think the only thing is finesse in short yardage throws, where he just loves launching that football and has a hard time reining that in. But if he can, he had in that South Carolina game, a beautiful back shoulder throw for a touchdown to Cedric Tillman in another
like fade route from the opposite hash. That throw was the 61-yard throw, gets the attention to Square White, which you're probably going to there.
Yeah.
But that fade route from the 30-yard line to Tillman was as impressive as of a throw I've seen him make. Just the accuracy of it and the situation. I mean, with White, you're just chunking it down the field, and White kind of had to wait on a little bit. But that throw to Tillman was great. However, he also missed, I believe it was a Cedric Tillman in the end zone that was wide open by about 10 or 15 feet, it seemed like. And that was a bad miss. And that's the concern.
You have to keep that to an absolute minimum, because that's the stuff that goes understated from Hendon Hooker that becomes a glaring problem when it doesn't go right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Milton is so amazing on these giant bomb throws. And then he has, Jalen Hyatt wide open across the middle, and he just launches it past him. That's going to stick out, and it's going to be a major problem if he can't get that together. Now, granted, I think Milton has become better in a lot of different ways. Hopefully he is more consistent in that mid-range game. And the big one, he has become a way more aggressive runner, and I think they're going to exploit the hell out of that in this game. I would be very surprised if they don't run him a ton and get him in positions where he can just be a tank out there. I think
he finally realized he's like the size of a defensive end.
Oh, he's huge.
I mean, he could be an edge rusher.
Yeah, he's absolutely massive, and he can just barrel dudes over. So I think they're probably going to run him. Josh Heupel kind of alluded to it today. He didn't say it straight. He got asked about that. Are you going to, I think if Price asked him that, are you going to run him more? And Heupel said, we're going to do what we got to do. I think that's what that means. You have to utilize the best parts of this kid, and finesse is not the best part of his game. The best part of his game is bombs over the top, and I think it's going to be strong running. So,
and we're going to get into a big debate, I think, after this game about whether or not he should be the starting quarterback in 2023. Like, this is the audition, because look, like right now, Tennessee, going in next year, you have Taven Jackson and Nico. Taven hasn't played a lot of football. We don't really know what they have there. Nico's going to be a true freshman. Joe Milton's got a lot of consistency issues. And I tweeted a video of his 2 great throws in that South Carolina game. Some Michigan fans made it into my mentions, and they weren't talking trash about Joe Milton, but they pretty much said, what you're saying about him, all this upside, just got to be consistent. We said it for 3 years. So you got to wonder, is he going to be able to find that consistency? Can he? Vanderbilt, it's going to be 60 minutes. 60 minutes, because we've only seen these small doses, a quarter of action, a couple of drives here and there, where against teams that are getting blown out. We haven't seen him in a competitive game since that Pittsburgh game before he got hurt, or the end of the Ole Miss game, I guess, which was still a very small sample size. So we're going to find out how much progress he's made on Saturday.
Yep. And thankfully, this game comes against the worst defense in the SEC by a pretty decent margin, actually. Vandy is last in scoring defense. They are last in total defense in the SEC by a decent margin. I mean, Tennessee's defense, as bad as it is, I want to say is like better than Vandy's defense by like 50 yards a game. So if that says anything about how bad overall Vandy's defense has been this season, there is that. I think the real threat from them is on the offensive side of the ball. They have a kid that can run, and I think that's got to be a little scary for Tennessee. They've obviously had plenty of problems with running quarterbacks, although I think the real problem comes from a quarterback that can hit you through the air, and Vandy's quarterback against Florida only threw 16 passes and 10 completions for 3 touchdowns and an interception. And then Vandy ran for 175 yards. So Wright was efficient in that game. I think, didn't Florida turn the ball over a couple of times? Like, there was some timely stuff that happened in that game that flipped it in Vandy's favor. And so overall, let's see what Florida went for. Florida threw for 400 yards against Vandy. So that's not a good sign for Vandy. And then they ran for 45. But of course, Florida was behind that entire game and kind of trying to chase. And so I think Tennessee's offense is going to eat once again here, even with Milton at quarterback. And the question comes down to, can you stop this Vanderbilt offense? Which, it's so crazy that Tennessee's defense is that bad that we are saying, can you stop Vanderbilt's offense? But they put up what they put up against Florida, 31. I don't think you can discount that at all. 31 points against Florida. And I would say Florida's defense is probably better than Tennessee's. So maybe not by a giant margin, but, because they've been pretty bad. But can they do it? What do you think, Zach?
The concern with Mike Wright's running the ball, right?
Yep.
I mean, he didn't do much against Florida. They were able to contain him, but Kentucky, he rushed for 126 yards in that game against Kentucky. I mean, that's a big reason why they were able to beat Kentucky. And against Florida, I really don't know. I didn't watch much of that game, and based on his stat line, I don't know how they actually beat Florida, but they did. But they held him a little bit. But Tennessee has not proven that they can stop a running quarterback really this year. Jaden Daniels didn't really try it as much in the LSU game. That was kind of before they turned him loose a little bit. That's the concern. I mean, that's a real concern after watching the South Carolina game last week is can they stop him when he gets, 3rd and 12 and they got good coverage for once and he takes off in the middle of the field? Are you going to be able to stop him and hold him?
I mean, you look at that South Carolina game. Like, I think the defining play of that whole game was the 3rd and 20. Where they were in 3rd and 20 and kind of I think Tennessee was still within striking distance at that point.
Yeah.
And you went, they're going to get this. I don't know how they're going to get it. Yeah, like there was zero confidence that they could stop a 3rd and 20. A 3rd and 20. So, and I mean, it was just a strike over the middle from, if I'm thinking correctly, just a strike over the middle from Radler to whoever.
Mm-hmm.
He threw to like 42 different receivers in that game, and they all had great catches and played well. Again, a miracle performance from them, and congratulations to them. But I mean, dude, do whatever you have to do. I don't know what it is, but I would say pin your ears back and don't let this kid throw. It looks like they're probably not going to try to throw that much. Well, I don't know. I say that they should. So actually, maybe they will. But and I don't know how much confidence they have in Wright to deliver even against Tennessee. Because quarterback, I mean, Levis looked like total garbage against Tennessee. They can play defense against the quarterback when they really put their mind to it. I don't know. It has happened this season against the kid from LSU. They play great defense against that kid. So it can happen. But will it? Which defense will show up? The one from the Kentucky game, or the one
does
from
Jeremy
last week?
Bates play? Does Jeremy Bates play? I mean, that's going to be huge. I mean,
sounds like he's gonna.
Regardless of whatever happened, you need him to stop Mike Wright. You need him to be out there to do some of that. And you know, as bad as the defense did play, we've talked about that a lot. I think we should point out that Aaron Beasley played really well for Tennessee on Saturday night. He was the one player that seemed like he really did show up, made a couple of really nice plays and gotten some gaps and stopped some runs from happening. Hopefully that same energy is there with the entire defense on Saturday night against Vanderbilt.
Hopefully. I mean, this game, even with Milton, does set up decently well for Tennessee, but it just, so much trust was lost last week. Like that's I think what a saying that really applies this week is what is it? You know, you can gain trust in an instant. Or what is it? You
take
can
years to gain trust.
Years to gain trust,
it.
And you can lose it in an instant. They lost it. I mean, it's just on the defensive side of the ball. The offense, you know, I think Heupel will get it figured out. Even if Milton has some overthrows, I think he's better than he was last year. I think he'll be more composed. I think that road environment, I mean, it's going to be 50% Tennessee fans, if not more. And so
I think they'll run the ball a lot.
The what?
I think they'll run the ball quite a bit. With
Tennessee
Milton in there, yeah.
Yes, I do too. And but on that point though, I mean, Vandy's run defense is certainly their strong suit. Their pass defense, the only pass defense in the SEC that is worse is Tennessee's. They both give up 303 yards per game. Tennessee gives up 303.4, and Vandy gives up 303.3.
And I don't know if I can handle like a 55 to 52 game against Vanderbilt.
Please no. Figure out a way. I don't know what it is. Figure it out. If you have to blitz like your life depends on it, if you have to, I mean, what even is there to do? And Vandy has Shepard, this kid Shepard, who's a pretty good wide receiver. He's one of the best wide receivers in the SEC statistically this season. And Wright can run, and they're going to be able to do stuff against you. They just are. This defense is that bad. Vandy is not a given because of how bad this defense is. And I think the real key to me about winning this game, you got to get up early. You have to, if you're going to make any stops, make sure it's the first two drives of the game and get up 14-0, 17-0, 21-0, and then work from there. You can then give up everything you want to, but as long as you get a couple of touchdowns ahead and then they're chasing you, I think you're in a good position. Because I mean, if you get behind, how can we trust this defense at this point, that this defense is going to hold up at all and get the game back in their control? I don't trust it. I just don't. And I can't. How would you after that last week? How could I do that? You know, it just is they blew that trust sky high. And it's obviously imperative. We already talked about how big this game is and the scope of Josh Heupel's time at Tennessee. But ultimately, I do think the scales are in Tennessee's favor. But it's just not that easy. It's not going to be that easy.
No, it's definitely not. But hopefully with some of the pressure off, they'll get back to being themselves.
Hopefully. Well,
man,
let's predict this game. We're almost at hour 30. And to anybody watching, we're gonna give our predictions, and then throw your predictions over here, and we'll read them out, and we'll get everybody's input about what they think is gonna happen in this game against Vandy this week, and if Josh Heupel can finish off the 10-2 season like we all hope that he does. So throw in your prediction in the comments wherever you may be watching, and Zach and I will give ours, and I'll throw it to you. What's going to happen?
Well, every game this year, except for the South Carolina game, I've went into it saying I'm not really sure what to expect from this game because we're still kind of learning how this Tennessee team operates and who they are. Against South Carolina for the first time this year, I felt like Tennessee was going to blow them out. I was concerned a little bit about the environment in Columbia, but even with that, I still predicted them to win by 30-some points. So back to not sure what to expect. I just think Tennessee's got too much talent. I think with Jeremy Banks back, I think this team will be hungry. I think listening to them today, they know what's at stake. They know they want to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. They don't want to lose to Vanderbilt. They want to go out the right way. They want to honor Hendon Hooker. I think they'll show up to play. I think they'll be a lot better. I still think they'll give up some points. I think they'll win 41-27.
41-27?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good, and that's pretty much what I'm thinking. I think this isn't Tennessee's favor enough. I think Joe Milton will have a good game. Throw for 250 and probably run for 75, I'm going to guess. And then I think Jabari will have a nice game. Maybe Jalen, maybe Dylan Sampson. I don't know. We didn't see him almost at all in that South Carolina game, although he did play some. So I think between all of them, Tennessee is able to do this. It is still Vanderbilt. I don't know how they beat. I could totally imagine them beating Kentucky, and I watched a decent chunk of that game. But I like you, didn't really watch them beat Florida. I'm not sure exactly how they went. I think Florida made some mistakes and Vandy capitalized. So, hey, all credit to them. But I think still at the end of the day, Tennessee, even after this game, is the number one offense in America statistically. And Joe Milton is taking that over. Tillman looked like he may have tweaked something again, at least, just looked a little shaky in that game. I wonder if they go back to Hyatt at number one. If Brew McCoy plays, we don't really know. There's some questions on offense, but I think even with all of that, it's actually what Nug says right here. I do think Heupel runs the ball a lot in this game, maybe 35 plus rush attempts. I completely agree, and I think they succeed in that. I think it's going to be bombs over the top because Milton is so good at that, and a lot of runs. So I think through that, I'm going to go 39-31 Tennessee.
Ooh, okay.
It'll be close. One score, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. But Tennessee pulls it out, and we're stressed, and we go, it shouldn't be this hard against Vandy, dang it. And then Tennessee wins, and they close out the 10-2 season, and then Joe Milton can have time to get ready for that bowl game and hopefully a big win over a nice opponent. And we'll break down the whole bowl thing if they can go 10-2 this week. I think it's just too early. It's like we're not doing a radio show where we have to fill time. Like, let's see if they win 10 games first, and then we can go from there, because that's going to be the whole thing. If you lose this game, your bowl outlook changes completely. So enough of that speculation, and we'll go from there next week. So let's see what everybody said here in the comments. If they agree with us.
I think people are forgetting a little bit about the history of some of this Vanderbilt rivalry, because they're talking about it's awful keeping it that close against Vanderbilt. There was a lot of Philip Fulmer games that were pretty close against Vanderbilt. A lot of 14-7, 17-10 type games when Peyton Manning was there. And even after Peyton was there, before they lost in 05, they played some close games. I think Ainge was hurt that year, but I think that was like a 5-point game in 04 when they won 10 games. So this series, it's a rivalry. They get up for it, and sometimes it's a close game, and that's not a bad thing. It's not anything bad about Tennessee. It's just Vanderbilt showed up to play.
You don't want this to end with Vandy doing the most polite field rush of all time like they did last week. where they
No.
literally walked down the steps and walked slowly onto the field in the most Vanderbilt fashion possible.
I can't believe they rushed the field after beating that. South Carolina rushed the field after beating Tennessee. A team
That was weird.
They've beat pretty consistently in Columbia. It almost feels like they're doing it for recruiting purposes. Like I don't want this to sound the way it's going to sound, but I feel like after Tennessee did it against Alabama, it got so much attention that other people were just kind of like, yeah, we need something like that too.
It looked really great. That environment was insane in Neyland, and yeah, it is good for recruiting. So
yeah, it was a good environment in Williams-Brice
know,
Saturday night
hey.
too. That looked. I mean, if you're a South Carolina fan, that's as good as it gets there for you. I mean, and it was a great environment, and we'll probably play well for them in recruiting.
Yeah, I'm sure. So Matthew says 56-24 Tennessee. Nug says Tennessee wins. I won't predict a score. Could be by 50. Could be by 1. Mr.
Probably
Jones,
very accurate.
yeah,
I feel the same.
I feel the same way. It really could be either one of those. Mr. Jones says 48-17 Vols. Dylan says I've got UT winning by 10 plus. Michael says Tennessee 42, Vandy 27. Ed says 45-10 Vandy. He's a Vandy fan, maybe in the comments there. And 65-35 Tennessee because we are pissed and ready to win. God, I hope so. I really, really hope so. So thanks to everybody for watching, for commenting, for hanging out, and for just supporting the show, because it really, this whole season, this is the last week before the bowl game. Obviously, the show doesn't end this week. We'll keep going every week, but this season's been unbelievable with this show. You guys have absolutely blown it up. It's bigger than I probably ever thought it would be, frankly. And I owe all of that to everybody that's watching right now. You're way too cool, way too kind to us. You guys are amazing. And thank you. So I'll say that. And then I'll read SEC football. He says 65-10 Vols. From your keyboard to God's ears. Let's have that be the outcome this weekend. Let's just not even sweat it. Just beat them down. That would be nice. That's it. Thank you for watching. Zach, anything else for the good folks at home before we bounce?
No, that should about cover it. Let's see. Tennessee made it 4 in a row against Vanderbilt. Shouldn't be numbers should be higher than that. Let's not let it get interrupted by a random Vanderbilt win.
Please, 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 please. Need this 10-win season for my soul. Ugh, after this week, just don't do it to me. Just don't. That's it. Thanks to everybody for watching. We may have more later this week. We haven't really decided yet. Could be a game time decision, but keep your eyes on the A to Z Sports YouTube channel, and we'll see if we post anything else this week. And outside of that, thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.